This episode is about the number 26 team on the Juggernaut Index, the Washington Redskins. If Washington's primary offseason goal was to assemble a dominant 2005 fantasy roster, then the franchise has succeeded spectacularly. 5 years ago, this collection of names would have absolutely steamrolled your league. Donovan McNabb, 22.3 fantasy points per game in 2005. Larry Johnson, 21 points per game. Clinton Portis, 15 points per game. Willie Parker, 11.5 points per game. Santana Moss, 12.6 points per game. Joey Galloway, 11.8 points per game. Chris Cooley, 7.5 points per game. That's unbelievable. Washington has 6 guys who finished in the top 10 at their position in per-game fantasy scoring that season. Not sure how they failed to sign Rudy Johnson, Torrey Holt, and Dante Culpepper, but whatever, minor quibble, the original point stands. The 2010 version of the Washington Redskins would be a badass 2005 fantasy football team. Naturally, they hired Mike Shanahan as their head coach. He hasn't been to the playoffs since '05, when he guided the Broncos to 13 wins and a division title. It's almost as if Washington owner Daniel Snyder suffered a crushing loss in his Yahoo Plus League championship that year, and he became singularly obsessed with building a real-life roster that could have won. If true, this would explain the Sean Alexander experiment in '08. In any case, we shouldn't need to tell you that 5 seasons is an eternity in the NFL, a league where the average career lasts 3.5 years. Throwback jerseys are sometimes cool, throwback rosters are not. If the Redskins are going to win games with their current talent, they have a small window in which to do it, like maybe 8 or 9 weeks. There's no reason Shanahan's offensive scheme can't be successful in 2010, of course. McNabb seems like a terrific fit for a bootleg rollout system that moves the pocket and requires a quarterback to throw on the run. And he will need to run, because the offensive line is a patchwork group. That unit was awful last year, and left tackle Chris Samuels, a 6-time Pro Bowler, has since retired. Oklahoma rookie Trent Williams is expected to replace Samuels, but not all the pre-draft scouting reports on him have been glowing. Check the National Football Post blurb via Rivals. He just needs to fit the zone blocking scheme, however. The addition of 2-time Pro Bowl tackle Jamal Brown will undoubtedly help. McNabb is coming off another very good year in Philadelphia, 3,553 yards, 22 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. But his old team nonetheless decided that it was time for the Kevin Kolb era to begin. At this stage in McNabb's career, he's 33, your main worry is health, not performance. He's averaged only 12.6 games per season over the past 5 years. When he's on the field, he's typically delivered 235 yards and 1.5 touchdowns while limiting the negative plays. He's occasionally brilliant and nearly always useful. McNabb has been a fantasy asset, no question. And then he gets hurt in Week 11 and you're forced to roll with Kerry Collins. The Redskins receiver corps is not a particularly exciting group, though it's worth noting that McNabb had big statistical seasons throwing to the likes of James Thrash and Todd Pinkston. He can certainly tread water with borderline fantasy starters such as Moss and Cooley. Galloway, at age 38, cannot be taken seriously. Third-year wideout Devin Thomas is the one Redskins skill player I've been routinely selecting in early drafts, always in the final rounds. He's flashed serious ability last year, notably in the loss to New Orleans with 7 receptions, 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But tweaks and sprains always seem to interrupt his development. Malcolm Kelly, another member of the 2008 draft class, sounds like he expects a few targets this season too. Like Thomas, Kelly is a big receiver, 6'4", who looks like a playmaker, but has yet to inflict real damage on NFL opponents. Fred Davis would rank as a top 12 fantasy tight end if Cooley wasn't still in the picture. Davis led Washington in receiving touchdowns last season with 6, filling in admirably when Cooley was lost for the year with an ankle injury. The Skins aren't loaded with high-end wideouts, so there's a decent chance we'll see Cooley and Davis deployed in a few 2 tight end formats. Despite the age of the Bills' skill spots, Washington would have placed much higher in this year's Juggernaut Index if the running back situation wasn't so ridiculous. Portis is the presumptive starter, but with Shanahan at the controls, there may never be a clear hierarchy. All we know for certain is that 3 high-mileage backs who disappointed us in 2009, Portis, LJ, and Parker, will battle for carries in 2010. That trio combined to score exactly 1 rushing touchdown last year. 1! Former sleeper Ryan Terrain appears to be buried on the depth chart, but again, there's no predicting this coaching staff. While in Denver, Shanahan transformed Peyton Hillis, Selvin Young, Mike Anderson, Olandis Gary, and Tatum Bell into red-hot, must-own fantasy commodities at various times. Washington's defense was solid last year in terms of yards allowed, 319.7 per game. But they finished dead last in total takeaways with 17. Under coordinator Jim Haslett, the Redskins are expected to employ a 3-4 front, which, as you may have heard, does not please Albert Haynesworth. In fact, Haynesworth has reportedly shed 32 pounds during the offseason. Doesn't sound like a man who's preparing to play nose tackle. The best IDP options on this roster appear to be linebackers London Fletcher, 142 tackles in 2009, Brian Arakpo, 11 sacks and 50 tackles, Andre Carter, 11 sacks and 62 tackles, and Rocky McIntosh with 94 tackles, as well as DB Laron Landry with 90 tackles. And with that, young hongs, we invite your thoughtful comments.